The Carter Grand Hotel in New York City was the center of the city's elite tonight. Inside its massive ballroom, chandeliers sparkled like diamonds, casting golden light over business moguls, Hollywood stars, and influential politicians. The scent of expensive perfume and aged whiskey filled the air, blending with the soft tunes of a live orchestra. It was a night of laughter, luxury, and power plays, and at the heart of it all stood Alexander Carter, a self-made billionaire, CEO of Carter Enterprises, and one of the most powerful men in America. Dressed in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo, Alexander held a glass of aged scotch, listening to a group of business executives discussing a multi-million-dollar merger. He smirked as they laughed at a joke, but his sharp mind was already calculating his next move. Nothing surprised him anymore. No deal was too big, no competitor too powerful, no challenge too great. At least that's what he thought. Until he felt a tiny tug on his coat. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was the fabric brushing against something. But then he felt it again. A small, persistent pull. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander turned around, expecting to see a waiter or perhaps the child of a guest who had wandered in by mistake. Instead, he came face to face with a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, with long curly brown hair that framed her delicate face. Big, hazel eyes stared up at him, filled with curiosity, confusion, and something else. Something he couldn't place. She was wearing a simple white dress, not the extravagant designer clothing of the wealthy children he had seen at such events. For a moment he was speechless. Children didn't belong in a place like this, especially not alone. "Hey kid," he finally said, his deep voice gentler than usual. "Are you lost? Where's your mom or dad?" The girl's small fingers clutched the edge of his coat, and she tilted her head slightly, her lips pressing together as if thinking about what to say next. Then, in the most innocent yet earth-shattering voice, she said, "You're my dad." The words hit him like a freight train. The room around him blurred, the chatter, the music, the clinking of glasses, it all faded into a dull hum. His heart pounded against his ribs. He blinked. Had he heard her right? "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. The girl nodded firmly, her hazel eyes locked onto his. "You're my daddy," she repeated. A slow, cold chill crept up Alexander's spine. He looked around, expecting this to be some kind of prank or misunderstanding. Was someone recording him? Was this some elaborate setup? He swallowed hard, forcing a calm expression as he crouched down to her level. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl hesitated before answering. "Isabella. Isabella." Alexander felt his fingers go numb around the glass in his hand. That name meant something. Somewhere deep in his memory, a door that had been shut for years suddenly cracked open. But before he could process it, a sharp, familiar voice cut through the air. "Isabella. There you are." The voice belonged to a woman, one he hadn't heard in years. His breath caught as he stood up slowly, turning toward the sound. And then he saw her. Sophia Reynolds. His mind spun. Sophia, the woman who had once meant everything to him. Sophia, the woman he had loved and lost. She stood a few feet away, breathless, her striking green eyes locked onto him with a mixture of shock and anger. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them ceased to exist. Alexander's mind raced. Sophia had vanished from his life years ago, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a hole in his heart. He had searched for her. Now here she was standing in front of him, with a child who just called him Daddy. A child who looked so much like him. A slow, dawning realization settled in his chest like a thunderclap. Could it be? Before he could say anything, Sophia stepped forward, pulling Isabella gently away. "Izzy," she whispered urgently, "I told you not to wander off." The little girl looked confused. "But Mommy, Sophia placed a gentle but firm hand on her daughter's shoulder, her gaze never leaving Alexander. "Go to Aunt Lily," she said softly. "I'll be there in a minute." Isabella hesitated but nodded, giving one last curious glance at Alexander before disappearing into the crowd. Now it was just him and Sophia. For a long moment they just stared at each other. Alexander's mind screamed for answers, but his voice came out quiet, almost disbelieving. "Sophia, is she?" "Yes." Her voice was firm, but there was pain in her eyes. Alexander felt his entire world shift. 6 years. 6 years and he never knew. His voice was low, edged with controlled anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia took a breath, her expression unreadable. "Because you were never supposed to know." Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander Carter stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Sophia Reynolds, the woman he had once loved, was standing in front of him after 6 long years, revealing a truth that shattered everything he thought he knew. A daughter. His daughter. The weight of it settled in his chest like a stone. His fists clenched as he took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "Sophia," he said, his voice low but intense, "tell me you're joking." She didn't flinch. Her emerald green eyes held his gaze with an unshakable resolve. "I'm not." A cold shiver ran through him. He felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. His mind flashed back to the past, to warm summer nights, stolen kisses and whispered promises. Back then he and Sophia had been inseparable. She was the only person who saw past his wealth and ambition, who loved him for who he truly was. And then one day she vanished. No explanations. No goodbye. Just gone. Now, standing before him with that same breathtaking beauty, only this time with secrets in her eyes, she had just turned his world upside down. "You had my child," he said, his voice sharp with disbelief, "and you never told me?" Sophia crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "I had my reasons." Alexander let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Oh, I can't wait to hear them." Sophia exhaled, looking around the lavish ballroom. People were still drinking, laughing, completely unaware of the bombshell that had just been dropped on him. "This isn't the place for this," she said, her voice lower now. "Meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m. Central Park." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You think I'm just going to walk away after what you just told me? Do you want to do this here?" She raised a brow. "Because I guarantee you, the press would love to know that the great Alexander Carter just found out he has a 6-year-old daughter at his own party." His eyes darkened. She knew how to hit where it hurt. Alexander was one of the most powerful businessmen in New York. Everything he did was under a microscope. If this news broke in the media before he had a chance to understand it himself, he inhaled sharply. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Tomorrow." Sophia nodded, then turned on her heel and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Alexander standing there, his heart pounding, his mind racing. The next morning, Alexander had spent the entire night tossing and turning. He had built his empire on control, strategy, and precision. There was no room for surprises. No room for weaknesses. Yet here he was, standing in Central Park, waiting for the woman who had just revealed the biggest secret of his life. As he stood near a park bench, he saw her approaching, this time in a simple beige coat and jeans, a stark contrast to the glamorous woman at the party. She stopped a few feet away, eyeing him cautiously. He didn't waste time. "Start talking," he said. Sophia sighed, glancing away for a moment before meeting his gaze again. "When I left, I was pregnant," she admitted. "I found out 2 weeks after we broke up." Alexander's hands curled into fists. "And you didn't think I deserved to know?" Her jaw tightened. "You weren't exactly in the right place to be a father, Alexander." He let out a humorless laugh. "That wasn't your decision to make." Sophia took a deep breath, her voice softer now. "You don't understand. Back then you were obsessed with your business. You were always working, always chasing the next big deal. I knew if I told you, you would have done the right thing, but at what cost?" Alexander's chest rose and fell as he fought to control his emotions. "You didn't even give me a chance." Sophia's gaze softened. "I was scared." Silence stretched between them, filled with 6 years of unanswered questions, pain, and regret. Finally, Alexander asked the one question that had been burning in his mind all night. "Why now?" Sophia hesitated. Then, for the first time, he saw something vulnerable in her expression. "Because she started asking questions." Alexander's heart clenched. "She's getting older," Sophia continued, her voice quieter now. "She sees other kids with their dads, and she started wondering why she didn't have one." He swallowed hard. "Does she know who I am?" Sophia shook her head. "No. I only told her that her father was someone very busy, very important. But last night," she sighed, "she saw you. And something in her just knew." A lump formed in Alexander's throat. "She has your eyes," he said quietly. Sophia smiled sadly. "I know." For the first time since this conversation started, Alexander looked away. His mind was spinning, but one thing was clear. He had a daughter, and he had already lost 6 years with her. He wouldn't lose any more. "What happens now?" he asked. Sophia hesitated. "That depends on you." His jaw tightened. "I want to see her." Sophia searched his face, reading his expression carefully. "Alexander, this isn't just a business deal. You can't just walk in and out of her life whenever you want. I'm not walking away. His voice was firm. Not this time. Sophia studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. Okay. Relief flooded through him, but it was mixed with something else. Determination. Because no matter what happened next, he was going to be a father to Isabella. And nothing, not his past, not his mistakes, not even Sophia, was going to change that. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander Carter sat in his sleek black SUV, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. His heart was pounding, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Today he was going to meet his daughter for the first time. A daughter he never knew existed. He inhaled deeply, forcing himself to focus. He had handled multi-million-dollar deals, made decisions that shaped industries, and stood before some of the most powerful people in the world without breaking a sweat. But right now, he was terrified. Beside him, Sophia sat silently, watching him. You don't have to be nervous, she said softly. Alexander let out a breath. That's easy for you to say. She gave a small smile but didn't argue. Instead, she turned toward the window as their car slowed in front of a small but cozy cafe tucked into a quiet corner of the city. This is her favorite place, Sophia explained. We come here every Saturday. She loves their hot chocolate. Alexander nodded, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. This place, this ordinary little cafe, had been a part of his daughter's life. And he had never known. As they stepped inside, Alexander's sharp eyes scanned the cafe, searching. Then he saw her. A little girl sat at a round table near the window, swinging her legs excitedly as she took a sip from a large white mug. She had long golden brown hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders, and when she looked up at her mother with a smile, Alexander felt the breath knocked out of him. Because she had his eyes. The same deep blue color. The same intense gaze. His daughter. Sophia placed a hand lightly on his arm, grounding him. Just take a deep breath. Let's go. They walked over to the table, and as they approached, the little girl looked up. Her eyes widened in curiosity. Hi, sweetheart, Sophia said, bending down to kiss the top of her head. I brought a friend today. The little girl's gaze locked onto Alexander, studying him in a way that felt far too familiar. This is Alexander, Sophia said carefully. He's someone very special. The little girl tilted her head slightly. Like a prince? She asked, her voice soft but confident. Sophia chuckled. Something like that. Alexander's heart clenched at how innocent and pure her voice was. What was he supposed to say? What do you say to the child you didn't know existed? He crouched down to her level, forcing a small smile. It's nice to meet you. The little girl studied him for a long moment before responding. My name is Isabella. You already knew that. He had spent all night repeating her name in his mind, letting it settle into his soul. Isabella, he said, testing it on his tongue. Felt right. That's a beautiful name. She smiled proudly. Mommy picked it. Sophia chuckled. I had a little help. Isabella turned back to Alexander. Do you like hot chocolate? He hesitated, then nodded. I do. Good, she said happily. Then you can sit with us. Alexander felt something warm spread through his chest. Acceptance. It was just a small gesture, but it meant everything. As the minutes passed, Alexander watched Isabella closely. She was bright, curious, fearless. She spoke about school, about how she wanted to be an artist, or maybe a princess, she hadn't decided yet, and about how much she loved painting with her mom on rainy days. She had his sharp mind and Sophia's kindness, a perfect mix of both of them. Do you know what I love the most? Isabella asked suddenly. Alexander leaned forward. What? She grinned. Magic. He raised a brow. Magic? She nodded enthusiastically. Mommy says magic is everywhere. Even in little things. Sophia smiled softly. Like kindness. Or laughter. Alexander's throat tightened. He had spent so many years chasing power, success, money. He had forgotten about the little things. The things that actually mattered. And now, staring at his daughter, this beautiful little human he had missed out on for 6 years, he felt something shift inside him. I think you might be right, he murmured. Isabella beamed. And just like that, his walls began to crumble. After an hour, Sophia glanced at her watch. We should get going. Isabella pouted. Already? Sophia gave her a knowing look. Somebody has homework to do. Isabella groaned dramatically but nodded. Before she got up, she turned back to Alexander. Are you going to see us again? Alexander's chest tightened. He looked at Sophia, then back at Isabella. He had no idea what the future held. But he knew one thing for certain. Yes, he promised. I will. Isabella grinned. Good. Because I think I like you. Alexander let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. I think I like you too. And with that, he knew. His life would never be the same again. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander Carter sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the city skyline. The twinkling lights of New York stretched endlessly before him, but for the first time in his life they felt empty. His world, once filled with power, luxury and ruthless ambition, now seemed hollow. Because now he knew the truth. He had a daughter. And for 6 years she had lived without him. His fists clenched. He wasn't angry at Sophia. He understood why she had stayed away. But he was furious at himself. For being so blind. For letting the woman he once loved slip away. For missing the first 6 years of his daughter's life. And now he had to fix it. But how? The memories came flooding back. His relationship with Sophia, how it had all started. Back then he had been nothing more than a man obsessed with his career. Love had been a distraction. Marriage had been something he wasn't sure he wanted. And children? He never even considered them. Had Sophia known? Had she seen the warning signs before she left? He closed his eyes, remembering their last fight, the one that had driven her away. Alex, I need you to be present. I need you to care about something more than work. I'm doing this for us, Sophia. For our future. No, you're doing this for yourself. Those words had stung. But back then he had convinced himself that he was right. That his work was all that mattered. And now he realized just how much he had lost. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. A text from Sophia. Sophia, Isabella really liked you. She hasn't stopped talking about you since we got home. Alexander exhaled slowly, reading the words again. She liked him. That meant hope. He typed a response carefully. Alexander, that means more to me than you know. A moment later, another message came through. Sophia, I think we should talk about what comes next. Alexander's pulse quickened. This was it. His chance to fix what had been broken. His chance to be a father. The next morning, Alexander stood outside Sophia's apartment, feeling more nervous than he had ever felt in his life. He had made billion-dollar deals without blinking. He had stared down competitors in brutal negotiations. But standing in front of this simple brown door? His hands were sweating. He knocked lightly. A few seconds later, the door opened and Sophia stood before him. She was still as beautiful as he remembered, her golden brown hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, her deep green eyes watching him carefully. Hey, she said. Hey, he replied. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Sophia sighed and stepped aside. Come in. Alexander entered, his eyes scanning the apartment. It was warm and cozy, filled with little details of a life he had never been a part of. A bookshelf filled with children's books. A small pink backpack near the door. A framed drawing on the wall, signed, Isabella, age 5. He swallowed hard. This was his daughter's world. And he had missed all of it. Sophia motioned for him to sit, and they settled on the couch. I meant what I said last night, she began. Isabella really liked you. A strange sense of relief washed over him. That means everything to me, he admitted. Sophia nodded, then hesitated. So, what now? That was the question, wasn't it? Alexander took a deep breath. I want to be in her life. As much as you'll allow me to be. Sophia's gaze softened. I want that too. But Alex, this isn't just about showing up once in a while. She needs consistency. She needs to know she can rely on you. Her words hit him hard. Could he do that? Could he truly change? Looking into Sophia's eyes, he realized there was only one answer. Yes, he said firmly. I'm ready to be her father. Sophia studied him for a long moment, then smiled slightly. Then let's take it one step at a time. A few minutes later, small footsteps echoed in the hallway. Alexander's heart pounded as Isabella peeked into the room. When she saw him, her face lit up. Mr. Alexander, she chirped, running toward him. Something inside him melted. Hey, princess, he greeted, unsure where the nickname had come from. But it felt right. Isabella giggled. Mommy said you were coming today. He smiled. I wouldn't miss it. She climbed onto the couch beside him, her little hands fiddling with a small stuffed bear. Did you know I have a recital at school next week? Alexander blinked. You do. She nodded proudly. I'm going to dance. Mommy is coming. And, she hesitated, then looked up at him. Do you want to come too? His chest tightened. Would she really want him there? I would love that, he said softly. Isabella beamed. Okay. But you have to clap really loud, okay? He chuckled. Deal. Sophia watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. But then she smiled. For the first time in a long time, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt before. And for the first time in years he knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be the father Isabella deserved. No matter what it took. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander Carter sat in his office, staring at the invitation in his hands. It was a simple, colorful card with glittery stars decorating the edges. You're invited to Isabella's recital, was written in big, playful letters. For most parents this would be an ordinary event. But for him, it was everything. A chance to show up. A chance to prove he wasn't just a visitor in Isabella's life. A chance to keep his promise. The old Alexander Carter would have hesitated. He would have thought about work first. About deals, meetings, and profits. But now he was thinking about a little girl in a pink tutu, waiting for him to clap the loudest. His phone buzzed. Assistant. Sir, the investors from Tokyo need a meeting at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Should I confirm? His heart pounded. The recital was at 7 p.m. A few months ago he wouldn't have thought twice. He would have chosen business over everything. But now he picked up his phone and typed a simple reply. Alexander, reschedule. I have something more important to attend. The old Alexander Carter was gone. The next evening, Alexander arrived at Isabella's school, holding a bouquet of pink roses. The auditorium was packed with parents, teachers, and excited children in colorful costumes. The sound of laughter and chatter filled the air. Alexander scanned the room until his eyes found Sophia and Isabella in the front row. Isabella's face lit up. She waved enthusiastically, jumping in her seat. He smiled, feeling something warm in his chest. As he walked toward them, another familiar voice made him freeze. Well, look who finally decided to show up. Alexander turned and came face to face with Sophia's father. Richard Lawson stood with his arms crossed, his piercing blue eyes filled with skepticism. Alexander knew that look all too well. They had never been on good terms. Richard had always believed Alexander was too cold, too ruthless, too self-centered to be with his daughter. And now, the older man looked even more convinced. You actually came, Richard said, raising an eyebrow. Did hell freeze over? Alexander clenched his jaw. He wouldn't let this turn into a fight. Not tonight. I'm here for Isabella, he said evenly. Richard scoffed. For how long? The words hit deep. Alexander understood why Richard didn't trust him. He had walked away before. He had let Sophia leave without a fight. But he wasn't that man anymore. He turned to Sophia. Can we talk? Sophia hesitated but then nodded. Dad will be right back. Richard frowned but said nothing as Sophia led Alexander toward a quiet corner. Sophia folded her arms, watching him carefully. I know what my dad thinks, Alex. And honestly, I don't blame him. Alexander sighed. I deserve that. She nodded. I won't lie, this is still weird for me. Seeing you here showing up for Isabella. I want to believe it's real. But I need to know. She hesitated. He met her gaze. What? She took a deep breath. Are you going to disappear again? The question cut deep. He thought about how many nights Isabella had gone to bed without a father. How many birthdays he had missed. How much he had lost. And then he looked toward the stage, where his daughter was about to perform. No, he said, his voice firm. I'm not going anywhere. Sophia searched his face for a long moment. And then she nodded. Okay, she said softly. Let's see if you keep that promise. As the lights dimmed and the performance began, Alexander took his seat beside Sophia. Then the curtains lifted. And there she was. Isabella in a sparkling pink tutu, her little hands held high as she twirled on stage. His heart swelled. She was incredible. Every move, every spin, she danced with a joy that was pure and beautiful. And when her routine ended and the audience erupted in applause, Alexander clapped the loudest. Tears burned in his eyes as Isabella beamed, searching the crowd for him. When she found his face, she lit up. And in that moment, Alexander knew. This was where he was meant to be. After the show, Isabella ran toward him, her little arms outstretched. Did you see me? She squealed. Alexander scooped her up, holding her tight. You were amazing, princess. She giggled. You clapped super loud. He laughed. I told you I would. As he set her down, Isabella looked up at him seriously. Daddy? She said softly. His heart stopped. It was the first time she had ever called him that. He swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. Yeah. She reached for his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his. Are you going to come to my next recital too? A lump formed in his throat. He knelt down so they were eye level, looking into her bright, hopeful eyes. I'll be at every recital, he promised. Every birthday. Every big moment. And he meant it. She studied him for a moment as if deciding whether to believe him. Then she smiled. Okay. And just like that, Alexander Carter, the ruthless billionaire, felt like the richest man in the world. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander Carter had spent years making million-dollar deals and running one of the biggest companies in the country. But standing in Isabella's room, staring at a tiny pink bed filled with stuffed animals, he had never felt so out of place. I want to sleep at Daddy's house tonight, Isabella announced, her big eyes shining with excitement. Sophia's hand froze on the doorknob. Alexander's heart skipped a beat. Sophia turned, looking straight at him. Alex, are you sure? He met her gaze. Was he? For the past few weeks, he had been trying to prove he was serious about being in Isabella's life. But taking her home for the night? That was real. That was fatherhood. He nodded. Yes. Sophia hesitated for a moment but then sighed. All right. I'll pack her things. Isabella cheered. Yay. Sleep over with Daddy. As her tiny arms wrapped around his waist, Alexander felt something inside him shift. This wasn't just about proving himself anymore. It was about being the father Isabella deserved. Alexander's penthouse was nothing like a child's home. It was sleek, modern, filled with expensive furniture and glass walls that overlooked the city skyline. But as Isabella stepped inside, she didn't seem to care about the luxury. She just giggled. Your house is so big, she exclaimed, spinning in circles. Do you have a playroom? Alexander froze. A playroom? Of course he didn't. His place had a bar, a personal gym, and even a private cinema, but nothing for a child. Guilt tightened in his chest. How could he have been so blind? He cleared his throat. Not yet. But we can make one. Isabella's eyes widened. Really? He nodded. Really? Her little hands clapped together. Can we decorate it with unicorns? And rainbows? And sparkly stars? Alexander smiled. Anything you want, princess. After a quick dinner, Alexander found himself in unfamiliar territory, getting a 6-year-old ready for bed. Isabella stood in front of him, arms crossed, looking very serious. You don't have bedtime stories? She asked. Alexander hesitated. I don't. She gasped dramatically. Daddy? That's not okay. He chuckled. What do you suggest? She thought for a moment and then grinned. Make one up. Alexander had closed million-dollar deals, convinced ruthless investors, and built an empire from nothing. But telling a bedtime story? That felt like his biggest challenge yet. Taking a deep breath, he sat beside her on the bed. All right. Once upon a time, there was a brave little princess named Isabella. She giggled. That's me. He smiled. Yes. And she lived in the biggest, most beautiful castle in the kingdom. But one day she discovered something magical. As he continued the story, Isabella's eyes grew heavy. Her tiny fingers curled into his shirt as she drifted to sleep. Alexander watched her, his heart full in a way he had never known before. And at that moment he understood something. This was what mattered. Not business, not money, but her. The next morning, Alexander woke up to the sound of his phone ringing. Carefully, he slipped out of bed so he wouldn't wake Isabella. It was his assistant. Sir, there's something you should know. Alexander rubbed his eyes. What is it? There was a pause. Then his assistant's voice dropped to a whisper. It's Sophia's father, Mr. Richard Lawson. He's talking to your board members. Trying to push you out of your own company. Alexander's blood ran cold. What? He's claiming you've become distracted. That you're prioritizing personal matters over business. Alexander's jaw tightened. He knew Richard never liked him. But this was an attack. And it wasn't just about him. If Richard succeeded, Alexander could lose everything. But as he glanced toward Isabella, still peacefully sleeping in his bed, he knew one thing. He had already gained something far more valuable. And he wasn't about to lose either. Not without a fight. Alexander arrived at the office, stepping into a room full of his company's board members. And in the center of them? Richard Lawson sitting in his chair. Ah, Alexander, Richard said, leaning back. Glad you could finally make time for business. Alexander didn't react. He wouldn't give Richard the satisfaction. "I hear you have concerns," he said coolly. Richard smiled. "I do. The company needs a strong, focused leader. And you?" "Well," he shrugged. "You've been busy playing daddy." Some of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Alexander met Richard's gaze. "And you think that makes me weak?" "I think it makes you unfit to lead." A silence fell over the room. Alexander exhaled slowly. Then he stepped forward. "You're wrong." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Am I?" Alexander looked at the board members, his voice steady, his presence commanding. "For years I built this company with ruthless ambition. But being ruthless doesn't make a man strong. It makes him alone." The room was silent. Alexander continued. "Since stepping into my daughter's life, I've learned that strength isn't measured by how much money you make. It's measured by how much you're willing to fight for what truly matters." He looked Richard dead in the eye. "And that's why I'm not stepping down." A murmur spread through the board members. Richard's confident smirk faltered. Alexander turned to his team. "This company thrives because of vision, loyalty, and leadership. I have all three. And anyone who doubts that is free to leave." Silence. Then one by one the board members nodded. They stood with him. Richard's face darkened. "This isn't over." Alexander smirked. "No, it's not. But you are." He motioned to security. Richard stiffened as two guards approached. "You can see yourself out," Alexander said coldly. Richard's fury was evident. But he had no choice. As he stormed out, Alexander turned back to his team. "Now," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "let's get back to work." The room erupted in applause. Alexander had just won the biggest battle of his career. But as he glanced at his phone, a picture of Isabella's smiling face on the screen, he knew one thing. The real fight had just begun. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander Carter had fought countless battles in boardrooms, negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, outsmarting competitors, and building an empire from the ground up. But as he stood in his luxurious kitchen, staring at a 6-year-old girl with pancake batter smeared across her face, he realized, this was the hardest job of all. "Daddy," Isabella giggled, holding up a burnt pancake. "I think we made a mistake." Alexander chuckled. "You think?" He glanced at the mess on the counter. Flour everywhere, eggshells in the batter, and a smoking frying pan. His perfectly organized kitchen looked like a war zone. Isabella grinned. "But it's fun." Alexander smiled. For the first time in his life, he wasn't worried about profits or deadlines. He was just present. "All right, princess," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's do this properly." Together they made a fresh batch of pancakes, this time without burning them. As they sat down to eat, Isabella swung her legs under the chair, looking up at him with big, curious eyes. "Daddy, are you gonna marry mommy again?" Alexander froze. The question hit him like a ton of bricks. Sophia. 4 weeks they had been co-parenting peacefully, but the topic of their past, and their future, remained untouched. He cleared his throat. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Isabella shrugged. "Because all the princesses in my fairy tales have a mommy and a daddy together." Alexander's heart tightened. He had money, power, and influence, but none of that mattered to Isabella. She just wanted a family. And for the first time he wondered, could he give that to her? Later that day, Alexander dropped Isabella off at Sophia's house. As she ran inside, Sophia leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "She had fun?" she asked. Alexander nodded. "More than I expected." Sophia smiled. "She hasn't stopped talking about you. You're doing a good job, Alex." Hearing that from her? It meant more than he realized. He hesitated. "Sophia, can we talk?" Her smile faded slightly. "About what?" "About us." About Isabella's question. Sophia sighed. "She asked about us, didn't she?" Alexander nodded. Sophia looked away, biting her lip. "I won't lie, Alex. You're changing. I see it. But I also remember the man you used to be." He exhaled. "I was an idiot. I let ambition blind me." "You did more than that," she said softly. "You broke my trust. And trust isn't easy to rebuild." He swallowed. "I know. But I want to try." Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Let's take it one step at a time." It wasn't a yes. But it wasn't a no either. And for now that was enough. That night, Alexander returned to his penthouse. But as he stepped inside, a chill ran down his spine. Something was off. The lights were dimmed, but he could feel it. Someone had been in his home. He checked the security footage. And there it was. A shadowy figure had entered his penthouse while he was gone. His heart pounded. Was this a robbery? A warning? Then he saw it. A single white envelope placed on his desk. With trembling fingers he picked it up and opened it. Inside was a note written in bold, threatening letters. You may have won against Richard, but you haven't won the war. Walk away or your past will destroy you. Alexander's blood ran cold. This wasn't just business. This was personal. And whoever sent this, they weren't finished yet. The next morning, Alexander sat in his office, staring at the note. His past was coming for him. But this time he wasn't alone. He picked up his phone and made a call. Mr. Carter, a deep voice answered. I was expecting you. Alexander exhaled. I need protection, for myself and my daughter. There was a pause. Understood. We'll be in touch. As he ended the call, he looked at a photo of Isabella on his desk. No matter what came next, he would protect her. He had failed as a husband. But he would not fail as a father. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander Carter sat in his dimly lit study, the ominous note still clutched in his hand. His mind raced through the possibilities. Who could be behind this threat? Richard was gone, taken down in the legal battle, but this message suggested something deeper, something more personal. The weight of his past had never truly left him. His ruthless business tactics, his once unshakable arrogance. Had he unknowingly made an enemy who wasn't willing to let go? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Sophia. Hey, he answered, his voice calmer than he felt. Alex, is everything okay? Sophia's voice carried concern. He hesitated. Telling her about the note meant dragging her into this mess. But keeping it from her felt like a betrayal. I just have a lot on my mind, he admitted. Nothing you need to worry about. Sophia sighed on the other end. Alex, I know you better than anyone. Don't shut me out. Her words struck a chord. For years, shutting people out had been his way of surviving. But things were different now. He was different now. I promise, he finally said. I'll handle it. For now, that was all he could give her. The next morning, Alexander stepped into his office, his usual confidence replaced by unease. His assistant, Linda, greeted him with a tense expression. Sir, there's someone waiting for you in the conference room. He says it's urgent. Alexander frowned. Who is it? Linda hesitated. He wouldn't give his name, but he said, you owe him answers. His gut clenched. With a slow breath, he walked toward the conference room. As he pushed open the door, his eyes landed on a tall, broad-shouldered man in a charcoal suit. Daniel Grayson. An old business rival. A man whose company Alexander had crushed in an acquisition deal 5 years ago. I see you're still enjoying the empire you built, Carter, Daniel said, his tone edged with something close to resentment. Alexander crossed his arms. If you came to reminisce, I don't have time. Daniel smirked, tossing a folder onto the table. Then maybe you'll have time for this. Alexander picked up the folder and flipped it open. His breath hitched. Inside were photos of Isabella. Taken from a distance. At school. At the park. At Sophia's house. His blood ran cold. What the hell is this? Daniel leaned forward. A warning. Alexander's grip tightened on the folder. If you threaten my daughter. Daniel held up a hand. I'm not the one you should be worried about. But someone else is watching you, Carter. And they aren't playing fair. Alexander's jaw clenched. Who? Daniel's expression darkened. Someone who thinks you stole more than just a company from them. Someone who wants to see you lose everything, starting with your family. Alexander didn't wait. As soon as Daniel left, he made another call, this time to the security firm he had hired. I want 24-hour surveillance on my daughter and Sophia, he instructed. If anyone even looks at them the wrong way, I want to know. His chest tightened as he ended the call. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Money and influence could buy a lot of things. But could they protect the people he loved? He wouldn't take that chance. Later that evening, Alexander arrived at Sophia's house. She greeted him with a soft smile, but it faded when she saw the tension in his eyes. What's wrong? She asked. He hesitated, then pulled out the folder Daniel had given him. Sophia's face paled as she flipped through the pictures. Oh my God, who did this? I don't know yet, Alexander admitted. But I promise you, Sophia, I won't let anything happen to Isabella. Or to you. Sophia's hands trembled as she closed the folder. This is why I was always afraid, Alex. Your world, it's dangerous. He stepped closer, his voice firm. Not anymore. I walked away from that ruthless world. but someone wants to pull me back in. Sophia looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. Do you really think you can protect us? He took her hands in his. I will. No matter what it takes. For the first time, Sophia didn't pull away. But the fear in her eyes? It told him this was far from over. That night, as Alexander sat in his office, another call came in. A number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then answered. Who is this? A distorted voice replied, chilling him to the bone. You destroyed my life, Carter. Now I'm going to destroy yours. Alexander's grip on the phone tightened. Who are you? The caller chuckled darkly. You already know. Then the line went dead. Alexander's heartbeat pounded in his ears. And then, like a flash, a name came to him. Someone he had wronged. Someone who had vanished years ago. Someone who was back. And they weren't here for business. They were here for revenge. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander Carter sat frozen, the eerie silence of the disconnected call ringing in his ears. The voice had been distorted, but the venom behind it was unmistakable. Whoever it was, they wanted him to suffer. His mind raced through the past, trying to pinpoint who could be behind this. He had crushed many competitors, outsmarted countless rivals, and severed partnerships without remorse. But this felt different. Personal. Deeply personal. He inhaled sharply and dialed a number. Mr. Carter? His head of security, Thomas, answered immediately. I need you to track the call that just came in, Alexander said. Find out where it came from, who it belongs to. I want answers. Now. Thomas hesitated. Sir, the call was rerouted through multiple locations. It wasn't random, it was planned. Alexander gritted his teeth. I don't care how long it takes. Find out. That evening he went to pick up Isabella from school. She ran to him with her usual bright smile, but he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that they were being watched. His eyes scanned the street. Parents were greeting their kids, chatting with teachers. Everything looked normal. But years in the business world had taught him not to trust appearances. Then he saw it. A man. Across the street. Watching him. The man was dressed casually, wearing sunglasses even though the sun was setting. When he noticed Alexander staring, he turned swiftly and disappeared into a nearby alley. A warning bell rang in Alexander's mind. He pulled Isabella close and hurried to the car. Daddy, what's wrong? She asked, sensing his tension. Nothing, sweetheart, he lied. Just in a hurry. But in reality he knew, someone was closing in. That night he sat in his office, staring at the list Thomas had sent him. Several names stood out, but one made his blood run cold. Michael Calloway. A name buried in his past. 7 years ago, Michael had been the CEO of a promising startup. His company was a rising star in the tech world, and Alexander had seen an opportunity. Through a series of ruthless business moves, Alexander had acquired the company, leaving Michael with nothing. The last time they had spoken, Michael had been a broken man. You took everything from me, he had said. One day I'll return the favor. Alexander had brushed it off then. But now, it was clear. Michael was back. And he was coming for revenge. The next day Alexander met Sophia for coffee. He had debated telling her, but she needed to know. She listened, her face pale. Alex, this isn't just about business. He's dangerous. I know, Alexander admitted. But I won't let him hurt you or Isabella. Sophia reached across the table, gripping his hand. Alex, for years I kept Isabella away because I didn't trust your world. I need to know, you're really ready to protect her no matter what. His gaze hardened. I swear it, Sophia. No matter what it takes. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then you need to be prepared. Because men like Michael don't stop until they destroy everything in their path. That night, Alexander's worst fear came true. His security alarms blared at 2:30 a.m. He jolted awake, grabbing the gun he kept in his nightstand. He moved swiftly, checking the surveillance feed on his phone. The front door was open. Someone was inside. He moved carefully down the hallway, gun raised. A shadow moved near his study. Alexander's heart pounded. Who's there? He called out. Silence. Then a figure emerged. A man dressed in black, standing near his desk. Michael, Alexander said coldly. The man smirked. Hello, Carter. Long time no see. Alexander didn't lower his gun. You made a mistake coming here. Michael chuckled, unbothered. Oh, I don't think so. You see, I just wanted you to know, I'm not here for your money. I'm here for something much more valuable. Isabella. The realization hit Alexander like a punch. If you touch her. Michael stepped closer, eyes gleaming with malice. I won't have to. Because you'll do exactly what I say. Alexander's grip on the gun tightened. You think I'm scared of you? Michael's smirk deepened. You should be. Because by the time I'm done, you'll know what it feels like to lose everything. Then, in a flash, Michael vanished into the night, leaving behind only a single whisper. This is just the beginning. As Alexander stood in the dark, his heart hammering, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about business. It was a war. And he would do whatever it took to protect his daughter. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander barely slept after the break-in. Michael had made his move, and now the war had begun. The threat wasn't just against him, it was against Isabella. As the sun rose, he sat in his study, staring at a picture of his daughter. She was innocent, unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. He picked up his phone and called Thomas. Double security at my house and Isabella's school. No one gets near her without my permission. Understood, sir, Thomas replied. But we need to talk. I found something. Meet me in my office in an hour, Alexander said, hanging up. An hour later, Thomas walked into Alexander's office with a folder in hand. I traced Michael's movements over the last few months, Thomas said. He's been planning this for a long time. He's not alone. Alexander's jaw tightened. Who's helping him? Thomas hesitated before sliding the folder across the table. You're not going to like this. Alexander opened it, and felt his blood turn cold. Inside was a picture of Michael, standing next to Sophia. His grip on the folder tightened. What the hell is this? Thomas sighed. I don't know what their connection is, but she met with him multiple times over the last year. Alexander's mind raced. Had she betrayed him? Or was she being forced into this? Either way, he needed answers. That evening, Alexander arrived at Sophia's apartment. She opened the door, surprised to see him. Alex, what's wrong? He held up the picture. Explain this. Her face paled. She took a step back, shaking her head. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, he demanded. Tears welled in her eyes. Michael came to me months ago. He said he had proof that could ruin you. He threatened to take Isabella away. Alexander's heart pounded. And you didn't tell me? I was scared, she cried. I thought if I kept him close, I could protect Isabella. Anger and betrayal mixed inside him. But more than that, fear. Michael wasn't just coming for revenge. He was trying to take everything, including his daughter. Alexander took a deep breath. Listen to me, Sophia. Michael isn't just playing games. He's dangerous. And now that I know the truth, we need to stop him, together. She wiped her tears and nodded. What do we do? Alexander's eyes darkened. We fight back. Before going to the next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Alexander knew there was no turning back now. Michael had pushed him too far. If he wanted a war, he would get one. With Thomas's help, Alexander set a trap. A fake message was sent from Sophia's phone, asking Michael to meet her at an abandoned warehouse. It was time for the final confrontation. As the clock struck midnight, Alexander stood inside the dark warehouse, waiting. His heart pounded as footsteps echoed. The door creaked open and Michael stepped inside. You really think you can win, Alexander? Michael sneered. I've already taken everything from you once. I'll do it again. Alexander clenched his fists. Not this time. Michael smirked. You're too late. While you're here, my men are heading to Isabella's school. Fear flashed through Alexander's eyes. But then, Michael's phone rang. He answered, and his expression twisted in shock. What? How? Alexander smiled coldly. I knew you'd try something like that. So I made my own move. On the other end, Michael's men had been ambushed by Thomas and a team of security officers. Isabella was safe. Michael's rage exploded. He pulled out a gun, but before he could fire, Thomas and his men stormed in. Game over, Thomas said, pointing his weapon at Michael. Michael laughed bitterly. You think I care about going to prison? I'll come back, Alexander. I'll always come back. Alexander stepped forward, his voice calm but deadly. Not this time. With a single nod, Thomas's men took Michael away. It was finally over. Days later, Alexander sat on a park bench, watching Isabella play. Sophia sat beside him. You did it, she said softly. He exhaled, feeling lighter than he had in years. We did it. Isabella ran up to them, giggling. Daddy, look. I made a new friend. Alexander smiled. That's great, sweetheart. As he watched his daughter's joy, he realized something. Michael had taken a lot from him, but he hadn't won. Because in the end, Alexander still had what truly mattered. His daughter. His family. His future. And no one could take that away. If you like this story, please subscribe to this channel and share with friends.